Cube World. A name that to most means nothing, but to a small group of occulted zealots means everything. Understanding the true cosmic weight of this game and how it spectacularly missed the mark is impossible without understanding how it came to be. Back in 2011, a man known online as Wale began developing a game called Cube World. He programmed, his wife did the art. Wale would amass a small following as he drip-fed screenshots and discussed his goals for the game online. Cube World, inspired heavily by classic games like Zelda and also by Minecraft, which launched a year prior, would involve an infinitely generated RPG world where towns, enemies, dungeons, quests, and everything else you would expect from an RPG would procedurally generate and players could progress through a world indefinitely. The core idea was very popular in the post-Minecraft 2011, where many people felt that Minecraft had failed to deliver its originally promised RPG content. The more information Wale released, the more ravenous his devout cultists became. And soon they would beg their master, leaving offerings of golden coins and blessed sage to bathe them in the glorious light of an alpha release. After all, an alpha release had done much to skyrocket the false god Minecraft and its dark profit notch to new, previously unheard of success. Eventually, 2 years after development started, in 2013, Wale decided that the prayers of his flock would suffice, and he released an alpha build of Cube World. Many, including myself, bought this early build of the game for $20 United States dollars in hopes that our financial patronage would will the game into being complete. This is where our journey begins. In order to review Cube World as it stands today, I will need to give you a short review of the alpha first. The Cube World alpha is a strange game, in that it doesn't really have much content, but the content it does have is so well done and so compelling that it's still managed to get players to sink in upwards of 100 hours, sometimes more, into it. Here's how it works. You make a character, select one of 4 classes, then you're dropped into the world naked and desperate. You helplessly flail around, killing various local wildlife, and explore until you find a point of interest, which will include a combat encounter, where there's always a boss. You kill the monsters, you get the experience, you get the items, you grow stronger. The farther out you explore, the more of the map generates, and the game world levels up tangentially with you. This goes on infinitely. You could theoretically gain infinite levels, travel an infinite distance, and level your skills in the skill tree infinitely. And you always have access to challenging dungeons. So basically, the Cube World Alpha is nothing more than grinding mobs for experience and gear forever. So why was this cult classic so massively positively received? Well, I'm fairly sure it came down to 3 factors: the combat, the progression, and the aesthetic. Let's start with the Cube World Alpha's strongest asset, its combat system. The Cube World Alpha has an almost entirely skill-based combat system. Projectiles need to be aimed, and there's a dodge that will allow you to dodge powerful attacks from certain enemies. You can also outplay ranged enemies by strafing like you would in a shooter, provided you're a ranged class. All of this means that if you were skilled enough, you could outplay content that was a higher level than you for even better loot, experience, or just to see if you could do it. It's also worth noting that this system isn't deep. Every class has a basic attack, a secondary attack that's usually charged, 2 combat skills, and finally, 1 of 2 special attacks that you can choose between. That's it. There's no advanced character build, there's no crazy skill tree or insane customization. It's simple, easy to understand, and extremely effective. This combat system also lent itself to creating extremely important sense of character progression. Pay close attention to this part of the video because this is a very important point. Remember earlier when I said you start out naked and afraid? Well, that's largely because you start out with only your basic and secondary attacks. You need to squeeze out enough levels to grab your first skill or 2 before you can really start comfortably exploring. This takes some time because you gain 2 skill points per level and you need 5 skill points in a skill to move over to the next one. This means that in order to unlock all your combat abilities, you need to get to level 6, And you also need to worry about your utility skills like riding, hang gliding, and sailing if you want to get around the world faster. This means that for the first 10 or 15 hours of the game for new players, they're going to be unlocking new abilities. It's worth noting here that these secondary abilities are also pivotal in creating a sense of progress. You start out feeling very slow in the grander scheme of the world, but once you get the hang glider, the level of freedom you have to quickly fly around the map is about as good as movement gets. Flying around the map and then swooping down to clean out a dungeon created this amazing sort of arcade-style gameplay loop that many people, including myself, found extremely addictive. Once you have your combat skills and your movement skills, it's time to get your gear, which is where the next big stage of the game lies. Grinding items. The more items you get, the stronger you get, and the easier it is for you to get more items. There's a clear sense of growing more powerful over time, and a clear sense that after a couple hours of playtime, you're farther ahead than you were before. Eventually, if you were either extremely dedicated or just casually played over a long period of time, you'd have an entire inventory of these coveted red items, the rarest and most powerful in the game. And at that point, you'd likely quit playing or maybe try another class to experience a new playstyle. That was it. There was no end game. There was no point. There was no complex underlying game design. The Cube World Alpha was just naked, simple character progression. I would argue that this game was almost perfect in its simplicity, and it still amazes me that such a bare-bones design could have resonated with people so immensely. Speaking of which, I think another part of the reason this alpha resonated so well is Cube World's extremely unique aesthetic and art style. The way the world generated to create odd, surreal landscapes, the cube designs of the character models and how smoothly they moved around, the saturated colors, all of this came together to create a very unique look that hadn't really been done before. Cube World's art style was actually surprisingly influential, and many games have tried to replicate it, most notably Trove. All of these games have failed, and as of my writing the script for this video, the charm and beauty of the Cube World Alpha are absolutely unmatched. The last thing I want to cover about the Alpha was this weapon customization system. In Cube World, you collect cubes of iron, wood, gold, silver, or whatever, and you also collect these spirit cubes. These are used to customize weapons. For example, let's say you want to upgrade a bow. Well, you take it over to the customization bench, you use the wood cubes, you slap them on the bow however you want, and you've got a cool looking bow, and each wood cube upgrades its base damage. But wait, what if you want to do some ice damage? Well, slap this ice spirit cube on there, and you're good to go. And your bow also has a cool little gem on it. This is a very unique and compelling system. If you watch old footage of the Cube World Alpha, you'll see the interesting designs that people came up with for their weapons using these cubes. Okay, so that was the Cube World Alpha. It was a beautiful gamer moment for us all. So what happened? Wale disappeared. The alpha build was never updated, many lost hope. But the true believers, such as myself, began to notice that Wale wasn't entirely silent. Every few months or so, he would tweet a single tweet, and with each tweet, our faith was restored. Sometimes merely a screenshot, sometimes a few seconds of video, but these small miracles gave hope. And over the years and years we waited, a grander image of the game began to take form. We hid deep within our monasteries from the infidels who told us that the game would never come, that Wale had taken the money and ran. We held out hope for the mythical Cube World Alpha update to bring us all the glorious features Wale had been sharing with us over the years. And then, this year, it happened. On September 6th, Wale announced that the game will be released in Steam in as little as 1 month. Then he followed up this announcement by further explaining that the faithful who had followed him for all of this time would be receiving the game for free. Our God had smiled upon us, but his generosity didn't end there. Not only would we be getting the game for free, but we would also be able to play a closed beta version of the game 1 week before the official launch. Then our moment arrived, the midnight release of the Cube World Beta. We installed it, and the tragedy began to unfold. Now, my friends, I can finally tell you about the Cube World Beta. The Cube World Beta has a very different core design than the Alpha. In the Beta, monsters grant no experience, but they do drop items. So you grind monsters until you've got a couple items, then you start exploring the area, talking to NPC, finding points of interest on your map, and completing various quests. These quests also reward no experience, but you will find all of your familiar utility items, such as your boat, your glider, as well as more gear to increase your strength. Eventually, after completing enough quests and fighting enough enemies, you'll be powerful enough to get artifacts. In each region of Cube World, there is between 1 to 4 dungeons that include a boss encounter, which leads to a chest with an artifact. These artifacts are how you level. At first glance, this seems like an extremely unique and refreshing system. You aren't grinding monsters endlessly like you were in the Alpha. You aren't grinding quests endlessly like in something like World of Warcraft. You're some kind of Indiana Jones character exploring the world and hunting down ancient relics to level. What an amazing idea. There's also a lot to supplement this idea. You find key items like this harp that lets you open certain doors, or this whistle that lets you summon birds to carry you to sky islands. You can also explore the area and find hidden treasures inside logs or deep underwater. For the first few hours of Cube World, you feel the thrill of adventure and progress, just like in the Alpha. But then you leave your starting region, excited to explore Cube World's infinite map, and the troubles begin. I've said region a couple times, so I should probably clarify what that means in the context of this game. As you can see here, the map is divided up into regions. All of the gear you pick up, as well as all of your utility items like your boat and your glider, and all of your key items like the harp, only work in the region you found them. Found a sweet armor? Sorry buddy, the second you cross the border, it's trash. Got a boat? Not anymore, dipshit. Okay, so every region of the map has its own progression ladder. That's not so bad, right? Every time you get an artifact, you get a level. So clearly, levels are the real progression of the game, and the rest of it is just sort of a mini game you need to complete in each area. Surely, there is something more to this system. Well, brace yourself for this one. All the levels do is increase your movement stats by microscopic amounts. There is no progression. You don't even have that skill tree. In the beta, your character starts with all of its skills for free. So we went from the alpha version of the game that had a progression system so compelling that it could float a bare bones game for in some cases 100 hours, to having no progression system at all. And when I say no progression, I'm not exaggerating. Because your level does nothing besides increase stats that are frankly irrelevant to gameplay, and all of your gear always resets, the world's difficulty is static. There is no system of scaling that I talked about in the alpha. The entire world is the same difficulty, all infinity of it. But it goes deeper than that. In the Cube World Alpha, the map was concealed with an RTS-style fog, and you could only see areas you had previously explored. And when you crossed the border out of a region, a new one would load. In the Cube World Beta, the entire map is always revealed, and you can talk to a flight master and fly anywhere you want from minute 1. You don't even get the satisfaction of progressing through a map. Even worse, there are no more random seeds. Every player is playing on the same map. So the excitement of finding some weird terrain or structure is gone. The Cube World Alpha was a game about progressing the strength of your character forever. The Cube World Beta is about never making progress once. This is by far the most shocking, earth-shattering change between the alpha and the beta, but there are dozens of other missteps. For example, the physics and lighting engines were rewritten at some point, which is why the alpha version has more satisfying character movement and more vibrant colors. The spirit cubes I talked about earlier were removed. The dungeons in the alpha have more enemies, better enemy placement, which includes patrolling enemies, and random items laying around for you to pick up. The alpha's combat is significantly more skill-based due to how enemy scaling works. Cities are larger and generally more detailed. I could go on here. Virtually every minute detail was changed. There is a large, noticeable drop in quality and design philosophy when going from the alpha to the beta. So now the question remains, how did we get here? I'll admit to you all right now, this entire disaster has been endlessly fascinating to me. I was very passionate about Cube World, so it's sad to see it in this state, and as someone who dreams of making their own game someday, I'm extremely interested in how a development cycle can go this sideways. A lot of people have been combing through Walle's old Twitter and YouTube channel and compiling all the information he gave the community to try and figure out what happened. We have this Reddit thread here, which compiled a list of all the features that Walle teased that were inevitably never included, and we have another thread that details something very interesting. Walle was steadily working on the game from 2013 to 2017, and it appeared to be essentially an updated version of the alpha experience. But sometime around 2017, something happened. Walle was silent for a long time, and when he emerged, we had the beta announcement. This seems to imply that perhaps many of these old features were scrapped and the game was rebuilt from the bottom up. This is also backed up by a blog post by Walle himself from September of this year, where he states that he scrapped entire systems often when working on Cube World. Why would somebody do this? Why would someone change the core vision of their game so dramatically? I don't know, and I don't think we will ever know. Even more interesting has been the reactions of the shocked community. Remember at the start of this video when I was using all those religious themes as a joke? It isn't a joke. Look at how the community refers to themselves on the subreddit. Because fans of this game are so devout, there have been various conspiracy theories that have arisen from this game's release. Some saying that it's all just an elaborate prank and the real game will be released instead. Some saying that data miners have found the cut content and the old game systems in the code, so maybe Walle will put them back into the game, or maybe the modding community can fix it. Some refuse to believe that the game's core systems could be so broken. There must be something we're missing, some secret that we can figure out to make the game good. Anything to cling to some vague hope that the once near perfect experience of the alpha would be returned to them. It's honestly been a little depressing to see the community so desperate to want this game to be good, and I don't blame them. Like I said before, Cube World's art style and aesthetic is unmatched. It can't be replicated. What a shame for it to be stuck in a bad game. So, can this be fixed? Is this a situation that can be resolved? As I write this, the full release of the game is 4 days away. There is no possible way that these systemic flaws can be addressed in time for the release. Time will tell if the general audience will enjoy the game. My bet is that it will likely be received poorly. But what if there was time? What if we could make Cube World great again? This is the section of the video where I can lay praise where praise is due. The artifact leveling system is, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the best game design ideas I've ever seen, maybe the best. The idea of being a relic hunting adventure that levels up by plundering dungeons for lost treasure is amazing. It's a unique and refreshing take on how leveling works in an RPG. Mob grinding and questing is played out in other RPGs, so figuring out a way around that is Cube World's crowning achievement. If we were to combine the core progression systems of the alpha with the artifact leveling system of the beta, we would be looking at a truly unique experience unlike anything that has been seen in a video game before. Alternatively, if there was some sort of overarching progress method to counteract the loss of items every time you enter a new region, this would go a long way to making the game feel more fulfilling. Like, for example, if the artifacts that you collected were actually relevant. This might actually make the strange gear system tolerable and unique. Will we get any of this? Almost for sure no, but only time will tell. The story of Cube World is a truly tragic one. Maybe one of the most tragic I've ever seen. I've been comparing it to the story of Spore's development. I'm sure there are plenty of other videos on that you can watch if you don't know that story. But before the end of this video, I want to address something that I've seen a lot of. A lot of people have accused Walle of being a scam artist or a fraud or that he's perpetuating a cash grab. I don't think these are true. He's never stopped developing the game, and he released the beta for free to everyone who already bought it. If this was a cash grab, he would have just dropped the game without letting anyone test it and fled the scene. Walle is an honest guy. I think he made the classic mistake of developing his entire game in a vacuum without any inside input. With no one around to test your game design, things can get really weird really fast. This is why one of the biggest pieces of advice people give to indie developers is always have a build of your game ready to play, so you can show other people and they can give you feedback. If there are any big updates to the Cube World story, I'll be sure to put out an update video. Until then, if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. You should also follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss any important updates. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.